Okay, the next tutorial. So in this tutorial, we're going to be creating a ball class that we're going to be using to have our balls bouncing around the screen for our dodgeball game. So make sure you have your dodgeball project up. Make sure you got your dodgeball, your button class, and your timer class. So we got to create another class. So make sure you go up to your little arrow, click on it, hit New Tab. In here, we're going to go ball with a capital B. So creating a new file, put it in as the second one in because it always puts it in alphabetical order. All right, like our classes that we've done in the past, class is how we start it, and we're going to call it ball with a capital B. We're going to have an opening and a closing bracket, squiggly bracket. All right, so start with, we've got to set up our variables, then we have our constructor, and then we're going to have an update loop and then a render loop. So first thing we need is to put in some variables. So we're going to have a p vector for our position. Going to call it pos like we have in the past, and we're going to make it equals to new p vector with just some preset corner position, top left hand corner. Alright, but we'll be changing that when we create our balls so that they start in a random position. Alright, next we need a size. So we're going to go float. So our size is going to be type float. Size capitalize. We're just going to make it equal to 30 to begin with. Again, that's going to change when we actually set up our balls. We need a float for, lowercase float for our speed. And again, we're going to have that as a float and capitalized, and we're going to make that 200, and again that's going to change based on when we create it. We also need a direction for our ball to go towards, and that's another p vector. This code will look very similar to code that we've written before, and there's going to be just a couple little mini changes. So direction, there we go. Make sure you spell it correctly. Equals a new p vector, and we're going to close it off with our starting location, top left hand corner. Lastly, we got one more thing we want to make this time, a color, and we're going to call it color with Australian spelling, not American spelling, as the variable name, and it's going to be set to a color of black just to begin with. So it's our RGB values. Alright, so they're our variables that we need for our ball class. So from here now we need to create a constructor, which is what we call when we want to create a ball. So it's got to have the same name as our class name, capitalized B, ball, and inside our circle brackets is we put our temporary variables. So float X for our X position, float Y for our Y position. We're going to have a float for our size, and this is a lowercase size compared to our uppercase size up here. So we've got lowercase. Alright, we're going to have a float for speed, again, lowercase speed. And then this is where we want to put in our color. So we're not going to have a randomized color, we're going to be able to put in a color. So we're going to go int red, int green, and int blue, which we're going to use to set up our colors. Alright, opening and closing squiggly brackets, and in here this is where we set up our ball. So our position needs to be equal to a new p vector with the coordinates of our x and y temporary values. So as you can see up here, we've got our temporary values x and y, and we're going to put them inside our p vector. Next line, we're going to have our size. We're going to make it equal to our size. See how the difference in the lowercase one here and the uppercase one comes from up here. Alright, what do we need next? Speed. Speed is equal to our lowercase speed. Same thing, we're using our temporary variable and putting it into our primary variable. Alright, now we got the color. So we're going to do color. So we've got our color variable. Color is equal to color, open bracket. And we're going to put our red, green, and blue variables that were our temporary variables into our color. So that will actually set our color up that we're going to be using when we render it to the screen. So we don't have a random color. We can set them all to red or orange or yellow, depending on the ball type we want. Alright, now one more thing we need to set up is the direction. We still want to randomize direction, so we don't need variables for this. We can just use our random functions. So direction is equal to a new p vector, and we're going to put a random in there. So random for our x, we need between -10, make sure -10, to +10, so that can go up, down, left, or right. Well, at the moment that's just the x and y, so it's left and right. And then our y values is up and down, so random -10 to +10, close bracket, close another bracket for the p vector, and semicolon at the end. That sets up all our variables we need for the constructor, and we are done with our constructor. So we're just going to put in here create a new ball because it's our constructor. Alright, now we need to do let's do render first. So we're going to render our ball to the screen. We need a render function because we need to set up our ball and our color. So we're going to go void render, open and closing circle brackets because that's our function. And then we're going to have opening and closing squiggly brackets to indicate everything inside our render. So we're going to go fill. And this we're going to fill it with our color variable. So this is the color that we picked when we set up the ball up here. We picked our 3 colors and we put it in here into our color variable. So now we're going to use them. So when we render this to the screen, closing bracket, semicolon, our ball will be this color. The second part is the ellipse, because we actually need to be able to draw an ellipse to the screen. And we need now the position, an XY position, so it's location, and then the size for the width and the height. So we're going to go position dot x, because that's our position p vector, and position dot y, and then we have our size, and then another size, closing bracket, semicolon. So that sets up our renderer. So we got our constructor and our renderer. So let's just put a comment here. Renders the ball to the screen, needs to be inside void draw in our main function for it to work. Alright, now put a couple of spaces, make sure you still got this curly bracket down the bottom here, and what we need to do now is do the update. So inside the update function, we need to move the position of the ball in its x and y direction, and then we need to get it to bounce off the 4 walls. So we need the left, the right, and the top and the bottom walls. So we're going to start off with creating a void update. So there's our update function, and we're going to open a squiggly bracket and close a squiggly bracket. Make sure you got your squiggly brackets. Position dot x is plus equal to our direction. Now from our direction, just make sure direction. There we go. Dot normalize. This just gets it to a length of 1 in our direction. And open and close circle brackets, and then we need dot x because we want the x component of our position for our direction. Now we need to times it by 1 divided by the frame rate. What that does is gets the time between each frame and times it by that. So that's a decimal point, so it's going to be a very small amount, so it only shifts a very small amount. And then we need to times it by our speed to get it to speed up, but stay at a consistent rate. Alright, so that's our line of code to get our x position left and right working. Guess what? To get y working, get up and down working, it's the same line of code except we change x to y. So we go position dot y is plus equal to direction dot normalize lies, if I could type, there we go, and dot y. So there's the differences, and then again times it by our 1 divided by frame rate, and then times it by our speed. Make sure the speed is in capital because that's our primary variable, and we're just going to save. Alright, so we've got our moving in left and right and up and down, but just at the moment, if we run this and we had a ball in our screen, it would fly outside the screen because it doesn't bounce off any walls yet. So underneath this, make sure you're still inside the update function. We're going to put some if statements. I'm going to need 4 if statements. We're going to go position.x. So this is, we're going to do the left-hand wall first, so left-hand side. So position.x is less than 0. Open squiggly brackets, close squiggly brackets. Make sure you got those open and closing squiggly brackets. Now we're going to change the direction the ball's going in for the x-axis. So we're going to set the direction.x equal to the opposite, which is the negative direction.x. So if it's negative, it becomes positive. If it's positive, it becomes negative. Direction.x is equal to negative direction.x. Make sure you spell it correctly and don't misspell it. Semicolon at the end. There we go. So bounces off the left-hand wall. And we're just going to put a comment in there saying this is the left wall. Alright. So now we're going to do the same thing for the right-hand wall, but a little bit differently than we've done before. Position.x is greater than. Now we don't know how wide our screen's going to be. It might be 600, might be 500, could be 1000. So we're going to set it to the width. And what that does is a special variable that gets whatever the screen size is. So we don't have to change it if we want to change the size of our screen. So we've got our if statement, and position x is greater than width, and we set it back squiggly bracket. So we want to turn it around again. So we go direction dot x is equal to negative direction dot x. Done. There we go. So that is our right wall. There we go. Excellent. Right wall's done. Left and right. We can bounce up the sides, but top and bottom we're still going to fly through at the moment. So let's go fix that. Another if statement. Position dot y is going to be less than or equal to 0. Less than 0. So now what are we going to do? We're going to open up squiggly brackets and put in here the opposite direction dot y this time, because we're using y, so it's up and down, and we're going to make it equal to negative direction dot y. There we go. Okay, now this last one we need is another last if statement. If statement position dot y is greater than. Now again, we don't know how high our window is going to be. It could be 50, could be 400, could be 600, could be 1000. So we're going to use height and set it to that. So now, okay, we open up squiggly brackets again, and the last one, direction dot y is equal to negative direction dot y. There we go. Right, so there's all our if statements in. So that'll bounce off our walls. Now, we forgot to put a couple of comments in, so let's just make sure we do that. So this one is top wall, and this one is bottom wall. Cool. So we've got left and right, top and bottom. Now, some of you might have done this code before in the past and have balls glitch out when they hit the side and sort of get half stuck in the side of the wall. We're going to fix that problem now. So in each of these if statements, we're going to add one line of code. We're going to go in this top one because it's our position dot x, and we're going to make it equal to 0. Alright, there we go. I'm going to make it equal to 0. And what this is going to do is it means that we won't somehow get it getting stuck between a negative number and 0 and bouncing the direction in and out constantly forever, which would be a very painful thing to have happen, especially seeing as you want your balls to be bouncing around the screen. So for example, here's an example of what the game could look like at the end of it. You want it to be able to bounce across all the walls and not get stuck in a wall by mistake. So in this bit of code, you can see that the red balls are bouncing from left to right, not getting stuck in any walls. So there's just a little bit of an insight into what's going on. Alright, so we're going to do the same thing here for now for the right hand wall. So we're going to go position, position.x is equal to width, because let's just make sure I can spell width, because we don't know what the width is, so we just use our variable width. So that's going to do the same thing. It's just going to prevent on the right hand wall we get stuck inside that wall. We're going to do top and the bottom now, same thing. So we're going to go position dot y though this time, because it's y. We're inside the top going up and down. It's y is equal to 0, because that's the top wall 0. And finally we're going to have position dot y is equal to height, and same thing again, we don't know what our height is. So there is our ball all done. Hit Control T, make sure it's all formatted nicely, looks beautiful. So we've got our ball, we've got our variables, we've got our constructor, we then got our render, and then we got our update. The only thing we don't have in our update at the moment is just a comment saying that updates the ball's location and bounces off walls, and this needs to be in the void draw loop to work. So we just put that in there just to remind us that has to be in there. Awesome. So we've got everything we need for our ball class, variables, constructor, render, and our update, with a bit more of an advanced update so we don't get anything stuck inside walls. Alright, so that's it for this tutorial. We've got our ball class. Next tutorial we'll be moving on to another class that's maybe called stars, so we can add some cool looking stars into our game. Alright, that's it for now.